Before we watch this next clip, take a second and consider how much of your life is transmitted over the internet. So much is at risk of being hacked. Head over to nordvpn.com/TYT right now for 75% off of 3 years of military-grade encryption for up to 6 of your devices. Sign up now and get a free month when you use the code TYT.
We must also be vigilant against bigoted or dangerous ideologies masquerading as policy, and that includes BDS.
That's Nancy Pelosi at the annual AIPAC conference. And I show you that clip because that type of thought process was certainly something you should consider when you hear about the vote that happened in the House just yesterday. The House voted to approve a non-binding resolution that opposes the boycott movement against the right-wing government of Israel. So this is known as the BDS movement. Introduced by a bipartisan group of members, the resolution supports a two-state solution, argues the global boycott, divestment, and sanctions, sometimes shorthanded as BDS movement, is an effort to delegitimize Israel and urges Israelis and Palestinians to return to direct negotiations as the only way to achieve an end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, similar legislation was voted on in the Senate, and it was actually more extreme than what we saw in the House because this House resolution is non-binding, whereas in the Senate, they actually want to stop people from exercising their First Amendment rights and being part of this protest. Now, the bill in the House, though, passed overwhelmingly, 398-17, and a number of progressives voted in favor of it, and I wanna call them out, okay? So you have Representative Ro Khanna, devastating.
One of my favorite congressmen.
One of my favorite congressmen, but he needs to be called out on this. Ayanna Pressley voted in favor of this.
She's great too.
Tulsi Gabbard voted in favor of this, although I'm not surprised, and I'm not gonna pretend like I'm surprised.
Unfortunate.
And this is a terrible vote because, first of all, it's a non-binding resolution. So we have a lot of problems in this country right now. Taking time to get together and it's basically a way of condemning people for exercising their political speech and their political activity, right? So look, the BDS movement I know is a controversial issue. And we're gonna talk about that specific movement in just a second, but I wanna talk about the bigger picture and what something like this means. Having members of Congress, having representatives who are supposed to protect our democracy condemn people for being part of a political movement that is nonviolent, that is based on a moral standard in their minds, right? To have the House and the Senate condemn them for that, I think it's dangerous and pathetic.
I feel like in a way, this bill is like the perfect distillation of what our government is. Like it feels like, yeah, of course, it's hypocritical. It sets a standard on this one movement that we would never set on others. It's completely removed from our view on any boycott, divestment, or sanctions in literally any other context. We sanction tons of countries. We boycott shoes, we boycott everything. But in this particular case, it's just not allowed. And we know that historically, this same sort of movement has been used in very important contexts. And really fast, it's another one of the examples of something I was talking about last week on the show where it's like, it's pretending that I just don't like this thing. I wanna go back to a neutral standpoint, but it's not. It's saying we want direct negotiations between a group with almost no power and a group with a massive amount of power. It's like if somebody has a gun being held to their head and they start to scream for help and you're like, no, don't scream for help. Negotiate directly with the guy with the gun. Well, that's not fair, that's asymmetric, and they understand that when they pass a bill like that.
Yeah, 100%, which is why it's devastating to see someone like Ro Khanna and also Ayanna Pressley sign on to this type of resolution. So I want to give you some more details because there were a few people, 17, who voted against this resolution. The vote again showcased the split in the Democratic Party, according to the New York Post, with Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib, as well as Progressive Caucus co-chairs Mark Pocan and Pramila Jayapal casting no votes. And as I mentioned, you have Pressley voting in favor of it. It also recognizes the right of an American citizen to protest or criticize policies of the United States or foreign governments.
In a very particular way, perhaps.
Right, so.
But not in every way.
Yeah, this is I think so short-sighted. And the way that I see this is, it's a form of intimidation, right? Because people who are part of this movement, whether you agree with it or not, have been smeared as anti-Semitic. They are not anti-Semitic. And I wanted to really understand where that comes from, right? Like, where does the accusation of anti-Semitism come from? Because this whole thing is, hey, we want the right-wing government of Israel to treat Palestinians better, to give them the same rights as Israeli citizens, right? That's the whole point. And until they do that, we refuse to invest in Israeli companies or buy Israeli products. I mean, that's your money. You can't be forced to buy things or invest in things. And it's their moral objective. That is what's pushing them to do this. So I looked into this a little further to kind of figure out where those anti-Semitism accusations come from. And the point that's been brought up is, well, the Nazis boycotted Jewish businesses. Yeah, they also exterminated, like they killed people. Like they didn't even allow them to have businesses. They murdered them. In millions of people were murdered, right? This is a nonviolent movement, and it has nothing to do with treating Israelis poorly or pushing to treat them poorly. It's all about equal treatment of Palestinians within that region of the world.
Yeah, it's a movement that has a very specific and at least hypothetically not very complicated end state,
right?
Which is that they have, you can go, there's three points that they want. If the right-wing government of Israel were to accede on those 3 points, then the boycotts would end. The people of both Israel and Palestine would be far better off, and you wouldn't have the BDS movement at all. But that's difficult to argue against. It's easier to pin it to these historical examples that are absolutely horrendous.
This is a political speech issue. I'm glad that this is non-binding, but the vote shouldn't have happened in the first place. And look, I think that it's fair to have critique of the movement itself, right? So how is this going to negatively impact innocent citizens of Israel, right? If you're divesting from businesses there, is it gonna hurt them with jobs and things like that? You wanna have those types of critiques. Awesome, those are valid conversations to have. But outright smearing people as anti-Semitic because they have moral objections to how Palestinians are treated is, in my opinion, ridiculous. And you're about to see a little bit of that in this next clip. So this is Representative Brad Schneider, and he is arguing, well, he tries to make a distinction here, and I want you to pay close attention to it. Take a look.
So I'm not going to subscribe it necessarily to the supporters, but the movement itself, its intent, its goals are anti-Semitic in intent. The expression of BDS, what we see on college campuses, the intent to create harassment, hostile environments for supporters of Israel on college campuses, to make it difficult for companies that are doing business with Israel in the United States and around the world. That is, by its very nature, anti-Semitic. The movement itself has anti-Semitic means, uses anti-Semitic means. That's why it's important tonight that we're going to have more than 75% of the House co-sponsoring a resolution condemning the global BDS movement.
So he would not say that individuals who are part of this movement are anti-Semitic, but he believes that the movement is anti-Semitic. And when he was pushed on that, on that distinction, he didn't really have an answer for it. Because he knows that the people who are part of this movement are not anti-Semitic, right? But it's easy to just cast this entire movement as anti-Semitic without specifically naming why, for instance, and who in that movement you consider to be anti-Semitic. It's just, I just don't get it. I don't know.
We have no direct control over the government policy of any foreign government. But we do have preferences, and if we feel like the cost in the human cost to the continuation of those policies is unacceptable, which many people do here in the US, in Israel, and many other countries, we're allowed to try to put pressure on them. And because we can't vote, we have no political power whatsoever in that country or any other. This is the sort of power that hypothetically we have. There is nothing inherently wrong in exercising that power, whether it's over the right-wing government of Israel, the government of Russia or Madagascar or France or God knows where. There's things about Trudeau I don't like. Am I not supposed to try to pursue those ends? I'm not Canadian, it's not up to me, but I do have preferences and I can support people in that country that want to see change.
I think it's important to have these political debates, right? And when you stop the debates from happening by intimidating people and smearing them and just calling them names, well, then you allow bad actors to continue to be bad actors. And we're supposed to celebrate freedom of speech here. And look, I'm not talking about people who argue in bad faith. There is a lot of that in the political world these days.
Yep.
But I think that if you want to come to a solution on this very real problem, you need to be supportive and you should applaud political discussion and debate, robust debate.
Well, hey, you made it this far. You must really like the Young Turks. Thank you. We really appreciate you. Now, another easy way to keep supporting us also helps keep your internet activities and data private, all with a push of the NordVPN app. Head to nordvpn.com/TYT right now for 75% off of your next 3 years.